Trump is reshaping the GOP majority, national majority, as in the numbers of Americans in each party in ways that the Democrats are and should be deeply concerned about. And CNN's, I feel like we should call him CNN's Ryan Gerdusky. He's the Ryan Gerdusky of CNN.
Formerly of CNN.
Well, no, but I'm saying we have Ryan Gerdusky is Clay and Buck Network now. He's got a great podcast there, which you should listen to, where he breaks down numbers and data. So, it's this guy at CNN. He's like bootleg Gerdusky. That's what I'm saying. He's a bootleg Gerdusky, but he's doing his thing over there at CNN. He's probably a nice guy. But this is cut two. He's looking at the data. Play it.
Donald Trump and the Republican Party has changed the electorate. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at party identification, Democrats versus Republicans. You go back to 2017, 5 points more of the electorate was Democrats than Republicans. You go to 2021 when Joe Biden was starting out, look at that. 6 points more of the electorate was Democrats than Republicans. But look at what's happened in February of 2025. Look at this. Republicans, there are more Republicans in the electorate than there are Democrats. Republican +2. So Donald Trump and the Republicans have remade the electorate. They've turned some people over from being Democrats or independents to become Republicans. New folks have entered the electorate who are more Republican leaning. And so when you combine that with the fact that Republicans are really, really behind Donald Trump, all of a sudden you get a winning recipe whereby you break the normal rules of politics and give Donald Trump that positive net approval rating when he had pretty much a consistently negative one in term number one.
So, Clay, at the same time that the Democrats have the most MIA leadership, I think, in my adult life, I mean, we can just say in the 21st century, and the Republicans just had this very solid win in the election with Trump. Now the national party numbers are showing something that's got to be very concerning for Democrats, great for us. In 2017, the overall electorate, there were 5 more Democrats than Republicans. 2021, there were 6 more I should say 5 more, up 5 points. I mean, up 6 points in 2021. Republicans are now up 2. There are more registered Republicans in the U.S. electorate now for the first time in a few election cycles. And this is just another indicator in the data, in the numbers of Trump is flipping Democrats to his side. So at a time when they've tried to say Trump is so extreme, Trump has brought Democrats over to the Republican Party. So I think their argument that he's such a far right and polarizing figure is even more challenging for them than it has been in the past, because now the numbers show, no, he's actually the great persuader, if there is such a thing in American politics right now. Nobody else is bringing over the same kind of numbers from left to right that Trump is.
Think about what Trump has done in the first month. He has shut down the southern border. And we talked about this with you earlier this week, but I think it's important to keep hammering that narrative, because forever they told us, hey, we can't do anything at the southern border without Congress acting. Trump sat down effectively with a pen and executive orders and completely shut down the southern border, such that it's not even a point of discussion or coverage anymore. Okay, so that's point one, which a huge majority of Americans support. Point two, he ended so far the war in the Middle East by his election. He now is trying to end the war in Europe. He has started the process of deporting violent criminals who should not be in the country legally. He has unleashed Elon Musk on the federal government to try and create a more fair, less fraud-riddled tax code and also federal budget. What has he done that's even remotely controversial? The only thing I can even think of is birthright citizenship, which acknowledged by the government and by his administration is going to go to the Supreme Court on a historical level to figure out what the law is on this. But by and large, why are Democrats losing support? It's because of all the things that I just ran through with you. They're not even particularly partisan. Who's in favor of more fraud and waste in the federal government? Only cheats and liars. Who's in favor of more people dying in the Middle East or Europe? I mean, does anybody really want hundreds of thousands of more young people to die in those two places by and large?
Well,
Like,
ask the question as well, or a continuation of the question you're asking. What do the people that were flying the Ukraine flags at the beginning of the war? They've stopped because they got bored because it wasn't really about Ukraine; it was about them. That's very obvious. But the people, they had the Ukraine flag and the mask and vax emojis all by their name, just so you know exactly, and preferred pronouns. Although those these days disappearing a little bit, not as many preferred pronouns out
vanishing.
there, vanishing very rapidly. But what do they want? They want us to just keep supporting Ukraine until what? Until Russia decides that it isn't going to try to take this territory from Ukraine. We are in what is effectively a war. We are the supplier of a war of attrition, the supply side of a war of attrition. There is no world, no future in which the Russian forces are annihilated and all kicked out of Ukraine. That is absolutely, no one thinks that's going to happen. So, what is the benefit of the perpetuation of the war right now, given that reality? We talked before about what happened in the U.S. Civil War. Well, there was a pathway to end the Confederate forces, and they took it, and they realized that, and the electorate gave Lincoln another term. No one thinks there's a pathway to expel Russia entirely. So, in the meantime, because of the political views that people have of Trump, they're going to want this conflict, which who knows? I mean, if you look at the numbers, they've got to be having, I don't know, tens of thousands of casualties, certainly thousands of casualties a month. I guess it depends on where you are in the fighting and what the current levels are. But that's horrible. These are people getting killed, getting their arms blown off for what?
Yes.
And no one seems to want to ask this question. Honestly, it's all you're a Putin stooge, or he's going to roll through all of Europe. No one's saying that Trump Trump isn't saying, Zelensky surrender. He's saying, let's figure out what both sides want. Here's the thing. We don't even know what Putin wants.
Yeah.
Shouldn't everybody have some idea? Like, we know he doesn't want Ukraine and NATO, fine. And that's pretty reasonable, actually, from the Russian point of view. I know Russia's the bad guy, but, they don't want a massive military alliance going all the way up to their border in territory that used to be Russian or Soviet territory. So what if it's something that Ukraine could live with? If it's something that Ukraine couldn't live with, let's say Putin was like, you know what, I want to have a puppet government installed in Kiev. I know we're supposed to say Kyiv now, but whatever. I eat the chicken, chicken Kiev, and we want our own government there, and we want to have full control. Okay, well, at least we know what the end game is, and we can decide: are we going to try to back Ukraine to defeat Russia for the next 10 years? Wars can go on a very long time. The Iran-Iraq war went on for almost a decade, like 9 years, hundreds of thousands of people killed for nothing, by the way. There's not some great outcome of this where it's like, oh, it was worth all the price in blood and treasure. And, that's where Kissinger said one of the most immoral things of all time, but people think it's really funny, which is, I wish both sides could lose, or we were hoping for both sides to lose. Both sides did lose. A lot of people got killed.
Look at what happened in Korea. We still have a demilitarized zone, and I don't think they've ever had an official peace in Korea, even after the Korean War. So here's what needs to happen, and I think Trump understands better than anybody. Both sides need to have an ability to claim that they had victory when they go back to their camps. Zelensky needs to be able to say, because of the bravery of the Ukrainian soldier, we stood up against Russian aggression, and we managed to gain something. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin needs to go back to Russia and say our invasion preserved in some way a Russian victory. Both sides, you know how in a boxing match, Buck, both sides, as soon as the bell ends, turn to their respective corners, and what do? They immediately raise their hands above their head. Even if you got your butt kicked as a boxer, they tell you to look like you won for purposes of the judges.
Yeah.
Let the judges make the decision about who won, but you go back and celebrate if you're not knocked out at the end of a boxing fight. That's what we need to give the opportunity to both Zelensky and Putin to do. Trump, as a master negotiator, certainly understands that. I think he also understands that the United States has been so in favor of Ukraine that he needs to give maneuverability to Putin to get peace sold. And by restricting our further tax dollars going to Ukraine, he is hastening the end of this war. And so I look, what are we sitting at right now? February 19th. I think there is a good chance, Buck, by May 1, that there is a ceasefire in place in Ukraine. And remember why this is significant. When the weather gets good there,
More
is
fighting
typically
happens,
when
yeah.
the fighting kicks up. So he is acting right now in what is still European winter. When there's snow on the ground, it's harder to maneuver. When we get to the spring, we need to have a ceasefire in place, or frankly, Russia is poised to overrun even more of Ukraine because they don't have enough men. This is where the raw manpower of Russia is taking advantage, which you talked about years ago on
Yeah.
this program.
Russia doesn't have to be good. They just have to want to keep doing it. That's the problem. They don't have to be that skilled. They don't have to have good generals. I mean, look at the history of Russia for the last 100+ years. It's vast. You can't control it. Has a ton of natural resources and will throw its men into a meat grinder for years. So it's a very different strategic calculation that they make on these things in terms of the cost benefit analysis than what we have. But also note this, Clay, if Trump brings this Russia Ukraine war to a conclusion rapidly, if it happens even just in his first year in office, I think that's very it's a very powerful reminder of how insane it was that the Democrats had Joe Biden in office for those years. You didn't really have a commander in chief. You didn't have somebody who had the mental and physical capabilities to tackle something like this and to really, because it's not just two people talking, right? It's got to be lining this up with the various diplomats and the outreach they're going to do, the negotiators, the strategy. But there always has to be, whether it's a company or the United States of America, you need somebody with a vision. You need somebody who sees the future you're trying to go toward in order to give everybody else the marching orders to achieve it. And we did not have that at all. And I don't think anybody can even argue we did under Joe Biden. So just the fact now that, the head of the entity, the guy calling the shots, is actually calling the shots in Donald Trump, gives us a realistic hope of bringing this carnage to an end. And I truly pray that Donald Trump is able to do it and able to get Zelensky to heal on this a bit and do what is necessary, because wouldn't it be so nice if we go back to just focusing on domestic American challenges and making sure that we're as wealthy and safe and secure and happy as we can be, and not spend so much of our time on some distant war that people want to make us believe is going to be at our doorstep unless we have a blank check to a corrupt regime where who knows where all this money and weaponry and everything else is going. I think it's very fair to say enough is enough. I got to hand it to Hillsdale College and their professors and administration. They were ahead of the curve. 10 years ago, they started creating online video courses you could watch for free. They started with Constitution 101, a free online course that helps you relearn all that you might have forgotten about our Constitution that you picked up in school. Hillsdale was founded on a mission, not just to give students a proper education, but to explain and defend our freedoms and where they come from. In addition to Constitution 101, Hillsdale has created more than 36 online video courses, also free of charge. Whether you want to learn about the history of the Roman Empire, Civil War, I'm sure is in there too, Clay, histories of either World War I, World War II, or the greatest books of all time, Hillsdale has your course. And all this learning is yours, free for the taking. Go online to clayandbuck4hillsdale.com. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's clayandbuck4hillsdale.com to register. One more time, clayandbuck4hillsdale.com.